Hello again, everybody. This is Steve coming to you with another video on writing. This one is about naming. You might think, well, okay, that's a pretty simple subject. I shouldn't need to listen to you on that one. Actually, there's some things in here that I want to tell you about that a lot of writers don't think about, and it's kind of unfortunate. So I wanted to cover these key points with you when it comes to like naming characters, locations, places, stuff like that. Now, if you're doing like a historical drama, unless you're creating a fake location, you use whatever was there in history. The naming of the individual people in it that are involved, unless you're dealing with actual historical figures, you're free to name them however you want to. But as far as naming goes, you're really, it's up to you what you want to name your characters, but at the same time, you want them to be story appropriate characters. One of the things though I do is I tend to have a bit of problem with names, as I'm sure you guys have seen already. I tend to struggle a bit with names, either creating them or remembering them and stuff. I don't know, it's something weird with the way my brain works, that some things, like something happens that's memorable, it sticks in my brain. If it's not memorable, it just kind of goes whew. And sometimes even the memorable stuff that sticks in there kind of every so often just kind of gets legs and walks away, which is weird because I can remember some other things that are, to just absolute crystal clarity, and then you come up to names and I'm just like, duh. So, but naming though can, like I say, can be an easy thing. It can be a hard thing. You can do cliche naming. Now, like I say, I've said before, stay away from cliches. However, there are times when a cliche name is actually very useful. As a bit of back history, in times of antiquity, people weren't just randomly given names like Peter, Paul, Frank, whatever like that. Their name was indicative or representative of who they are. Because their names had meaning. Nowadays, our names have meanings. Like my first name's Steve, which comes from the Greek word Stephanos, which means crown. It's not like a crown like you see on the head of a king. It's like this little garland of like olive leaves and vines and stuff like that. It's kind of a prince's crown in a sense, or like if. Probably, I think where you would see the Stephanos used the most. It comes from ancient Greece, and it was used a lot with like the Olympics and the various sports and games and stuff. Like if somebody won, you didn't give them a gold, a silver, or a bronze medal. You gave them a Stephanos, and they would have like different Stephanos for each person who got like first place, second place, third place, stuff like that. So it was essentially like a trophy in a sense, but there's other people like take a look at the Native Americans. You've got great Native Americans like Running Bull. If you look at it in their language, that his name is entirely different, but when you translate it, it's translated as Running Bull. It was Running Bull, Sitting Bull, Bison having coffee. Just kidding. No, but there was different ones that you had. Sitting Bull. You had. There's even a movie called Dances with Wolves where the Native Americans give the one American who comes in there a name of Dances with Wolves, because when they first see him, they see him dancing with a wolf that he had rescued. If I'm remembering that movie correctly, so they called him Dances with Wolves because that described who he was. So, names have meanings, and names can change. Like in our world, names only change if the person wants to change them. But in more ancient societies and fantasy societies and stuff like that, those names would change as the person grew, matured, did different things. And it could be like, their name could start out as Terry the arborist and become, Elrod the Dragon Slayer or something like that. Their name would change as they were doing various things. Now, as you're looking at this here, you're probably wondering, okay, why have I got this website up? And why am I dealing with dragon names? Well, I just happen to have it bookmarked on the dragon name generator because I was needing that a lot for Off-World Chronicles. So that's where my bookmark was. But this website, it is fantasynamegenerators.com. And this place is really interesting. You've got place and location names. You got company, continent, coral reefs, craft store names. I got some ideas for pub names. Now, I'm not saying that when I was in here I took a name verbatim out of here. Some of them I did just because the name worked really good. Some of them I took and I looked at it and said, that's a good name, but I'm going to mash it up and do it a little differently like this. There's ironic, Snowflake Mansion. But, you got different names here, like for mansions, Snowflake, Cedar Grove, Crystal Lake. Some of them are pretty cliche. You can click down here and it'll generate more of them. It's like, see, these are the fancier ones. It'll give you simpler ones, common ones, stuff like that. You got real names of, different people groups. Africa, Australia, Asia, things like that. You go away. Fantasy and folklore. You've got aliens. You've got bandit names. Some of these, they're more tailored, and a lot of these are tailored towards fantasy stuff because it's called the Fantasy Name Generator. But you can use this for more modern stuff. You can use this for what is it? Sci-fi. I borrowed ideas out of here for sci-fi for things that I got stuck on. You can do jewelry, you can do plagues, you can do titles, ranks. They've added pop culture for like Lord of the Rings, Marvel Comics, stuff like that. Different genres. They even include like a wand. This is kind of cool. They got like a wand description generator where you can generate the description of a wand. Support. But yeah, it's got, and I'm pretty sure my screen isn't quite tall enough for you to see this. I apologize for that. But yeah, you can go up to that website and see it yourself. The actual, the website here, like I say, is really good for coming up with names and stuff because, let's see, fantasy names, dragon names. Oh, here we go, Japanese. Haha. So yeah, you can get Japanese names, and some of these will give you ideas. Like I had one of them. I think I wasn't even doing dragon name, I don't think, on that one. I came up with a name for one of the dragons. It was Maggie's mom, Ophina. I think like ones like Fallon and Garlund, I came up with those and Maggie, aka Magendra, came up with those on my own, but there were other ones that I needed a little help with, and this site is really good for that. Like I say, you can take it either as they give it to you, or you can take it and make your something unique that's all your own. And don't worry about copyright. As long as you're not blatantly stealing the name and trying to represent somebody else, like if you're in there and you take the name Gandalf and you put it into your book and he's a wizard and he's got hobbits and stuff like that. If basically if you're not trying to blatantly plagiarize, the nice thing about names is names can't be copyrighted, and they can be trademarked, but there's guidelines on the trademarking that make it where you can use that name without any risk of legal penalties. Now, I would read up on that for the legalities of it, but those names can be reused because they can't be copyrighted per U.S. law. Now, I don't know what it is in other countries, but I know in U.S. copyright law you can't copyright names. You can trademark them, but it has to be something that you can prove is unique. If you're trademarking it just to go screw somebody over, good luck keeping your trademark. Because trademark office very thankfully kind of frowns on that. But anyways, that being said, there's now that I've gotten this here, because like I say, this is a very useful tool. Now, when it comes to naming characters, one of the things that I did wrong at the beginning, but later got some good tutoring on this and some instruction, is when you name something in a book, it has to be easy for the reader to read. In other words, don't make a 46 character long name unless it's an absolute necessity. Make it easy for the reader to read, and if you ever have audiobooks done, you got to remember your audiobook reader guy is going to have to read that name. Now, I do have a couple names in my Off-World Chronicles series that are kind of in there intentionally to troll, not so much the reader, but to kind of troll the future audiobook reader, the guy who's going to, or whoever it is that's going to do the audiobooks. And it's going to be hilarious because they're going to get in there and they're going to look at that name and they're just going to be like, Bob. We're just going to call him Bob, But thankfully, I only use the name once or twice, so they get that real brief trolling, and then they just go back out to the normal names and stuff. That's also why I use very common names in the main characters, like Alex and Barash and Yerg and stuff. They're names that are easy to pronounce for the ones that are used regularly. Another thing, too, is when it comes to naming things, one of the rules that I ran into, and it's a loose rule. You can run loose and fast with this one, but it's a good one to follow if you can. And that's the idea that don't name a character, a place, an object, etc. unless you absolutely have to. If it is a main part of the story, give it a name. If it's just somebody in passing, unless that name needs to be spoken by the characters, don't give it a name. If it needs to be spoken by the characters, give it a name. But understand that your character has to have at least some importance and some impact on the story of a reasonable level to justify the name. Like, for example, I'll shoot this one from the hip. Let's just say you're in doing a Western, and some guy walks in. He's wearing a white cowboy hat, leather vested like jacket, a white dress shirt underneath, one of the fancy cowboy dress shirts, with all the colorful buttons and stuff like that. And he's wearing a pair of chaps and some cowboy boots, and he's just come in from a long ride, so he's all dusty and dirty. He's wearing a mustache, and he's got a Stetson on and stuff like that. And he walks into the bar, looks at the bartender, says, "Where can I find a hotel for the night?" Bartender says, "Go down the street to the left, and there's your hotel." Okay, he walks out the door. And at that point, you're done with him. There's no need to name the guy. You just call him a cowboy, or you describe him as a cowboy who just come in off the trail or something. Now, you got some guy who is the mayor of the city. Now, that one's kind of a 50-50. Do you just call him the mayor? Or do you call him like Mayor Thompson? It's a question of how personalized that person needs to be. And, like I say, if they're an incidental character, they're only there for that one scene unless you absolutely need to give them a name. And that usually happens when you're doing dialogue. But not always, because I've done dialogue where I'm just doing person one, person two, back and forth, back and forth. I'll say, well, the first man said such and such, and the second man replied, and I'll go back and forth like that, because there's no need to name the characters. But then there's other situations where the character is, the character's existence in the story is lengthy enough that he justifies naming. And again, there's no black and white rules on when you need to switch from just him and her, or they and them, or it. If it's like, a monster, it's like you could say like, well, the goblin came down the street and did such and such and so and so. Does the goblin have a name? Sure. Do you need to tell him what that name is? No. I mean, if you want to name them for your own purposes, for tracking in your books and stuff, or your not your books, your notes in your super world, go for it. But like if you're just passing an incidental character, don't name them, because you spin up a name, and as soon as readers see a name, they're like, oh, this must be somebody important to the story. If the guy walks in, does two things, walks out, and you never see him again, it's like, why? Why did you name him? Why has he got a name? Because he's not an important character. He's an incidental character that just needs to come in, do his thing, and leave. I'm trying to think. Well, if I remember correctly, it was in Gold Rush under Offworld Chronicles. I actually have a character in there who's the mayor of the city, and I spend the whole section where he's at calling him mayor. That's it. I call him mayor because there was no need to give him a name. The title was sufficient, and a lot of times titles are sufficient. You run into somebody, guy walks around the corner and you say, "Good morning, Captain," and the guy responds, "Good morning, Ensign." And ensign and captain might be all you need to know about them. If one guy's the captain, the other guy's an ensign. You know their ranks. You don't need to know their names. Like I say, they can fill large sections of the book, and you only need to ever go as far as calling them by their ranks. In a sense, you are naming them, but it's not a direct name. That's not something you would stick on a name badge. Hi, I'm Captain, because that's their rank. That's going to be what's going to be on their shoulder boards or their rank pins or whatever. Somebody comes in and they're serving you dinner. They just call them the waiter. If they suddenly take on a personal aspect to the story, like the waiter turns out to be somebody's long lost son, give them a name. What's another one to deal with? Also, when you do your names, the names should be as close as you can. You don't have to this is not a hard and fast rule. But keep your names species, gender, or nationality specific, I'll say. So if you name somebody an orc, you're not going to call him, Pixie the Flower Girl. If you got this big, ugly, nasty brute of a goblin or an orc or whatever like that, you're probably going to call him, Garvon the Destroyer or something like that, or I am blood, it's like I am Blood Slayer, or something like that. You're going to give him, like I said, you're going to give him a character appropriate name, something that either has the feel necessary for that character or that race. Like if they're a Viking, you're going to give them an appropriate Viking name. Now, and you also, like I say, it's not a hard and fast rule. There's one in there. If you look at like Earthfleet and the Yandians, in the Yandian with the Yandians, they're kind of an interesting. They're an interesting species in the fact that their language is such that the names they give for themselves don't translate. Because when they say their name is something like, and translators are over going, the heck did I just hear? Because it's so contextual, or their language is so contextual that it makes it impossible for the universal translators to translate their names. So they just go with names that people give them. It's like Finch. Finch's race has the same problem. Their language is so contextual that the same word can be spoken 5 different ways and mean 5 different things, but then you add in different environmental things, and now that same word can mean 10 different things because you have the 5 possible meanings plus the contextual background, so now it has 10 possible meanings. Chinese is a good example of that too. You can have the same word spoken 4 different ways with different inflections, and it means 4 different things. So in their case, the people they interact with give them different names. That's how Patch got his name. Loki got his name. Finch got his name. Is that the people they interacted with gave them kind of nicknames. And in some cases, you will have to give people nicknames. Magendra or Maggie, that's a good example right there. When Magendra introduced herself to most people, the dragons would address her as Magendra Telenon. That was her full name. Her full name with title was Magendra Telenon, daughter of Shuman, son of Naran, master of the Northern Weir. So that's a bloody mouthful. And there's kind of a tongue-in-cheek joke in there when she introduces herself. Arya's like, "Can I just call you Maggie?" So Magendra's like, "Yeah, okay, I could do that." So it's some people will get nicknames. They will have a full name and they will have a nickname. There's also different naming schemes where you will have your quote-unquote real name and your real name and your what I would kind of call your fake name or your given name. And there's a couple of different book series that use that same thing. There's one of them in there where they have a mage, and if you've read the book, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's this mage called Sparrow. He has a real name, but everybody just knows him as Sparrow because that's his fake name. Because in those books, if you know the person's real name and you speak it, you have power over them. So they use the nicknames because the nicknames are not their real names. So therefore, you would not have power over them. One of the books from that series, it was a Ghibli film, and I can't remember the name of it. I can picture it. It was a good series. I liked the first 4 books. The 5th book was kind of but the first 4 was really good. In the one, I think it was the 2nd or 3rd book of that series was made by Ghibli into a movie, and it's basically this kid that goes nuts, stabs his dad, runs off with his sword, and he runs into Sparrow, and he runs into this girl who later on turns out to be a dragon. Beginning of the film, you see like 2 dragons fighting each other in the sky over a stormy sea. Go look it up. The Ghibli anime will take you back to the actual book series, and it's a really good book series. Like I say, I wish I could remember the name, but that's a good example where you have multiple names. Belgariad series is another one. C.S. Lewis kind of touches on that a little bit in Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, but there's other ones that do kind of the multiple name thing. And if you do have multiple names, you need to make sure you keep track of those, because I've actually had it in a book where if it wasn't for my notes, I would have really messed this up. Where I've had a character, and like right in the middle of the dialogue, the character changes names, and in some cases changes genders, and in some cases the flow of the conversation completely flips and goes the other way, where like one guy's like, "I'm from Logantown," and the other guy's like, "Well, I'm from East Seattle," and then halfway through they trade places where the guy from Logantown is now from Seattle and the guy from Seattle is from Logantown. You got to watch out for that. You can do that. It's just, if you're following the feel of the dialogue and the story, that can happen. It's unfortunate when it does. You have to kind of go back and try to figure out how to fix that. But it's, and still get the same feel and get the same flow and everything like that, but it's doable. When you do your naming, also, it doesn't have to be on every case, but this is a good practice because it'll give you deeper insights into your characters. If they're a minor character, an incidental character, like in Offworld Chronicles, you have Bimranth. Bimranth is basically, he's not a character in the book, he's a mention of a character. Basically, he's a mention of an ancestor. And I actually have very few notes on him because all he is essentially a historical placeholder. Like this is where these guys came from, and he's one of the major characters in that in that process. But then there's other people like well, take a look at Earthfleet. That or the name itself is Earth and Fleet joined together, and that name describes what that organization does, which is they are a fleet from Earth. Now, it doesn't describe it entirely, but it does describe the fact that they are a fleet that is from Earth. But you also want to look at the fact that that name is going to have history, it's going to have purpose, it's going to have meaning. So you might have copious notes on that. And here's the funny part. If you look at my wiki, there's going to be times you're going to have characters where there's more story in the actual wiki or in your notes than there is in the actual story when it comes to certain characters. Trying to think if there's anything else I want to throw out there because I'm running out of time again. I can't think of anything else, ironically enough. I actually think I ran out of content. But yeah, like I say, naming is an important part of writing. And if you get the name wrong, you're going to hate yourself. So do put some effort into your character naming. Give them meaning, give them background, pick a name that is appropriate to the character. But also be considerate of your readers. Be considerate of possible future audiobook readers, the guys that that do the they actually read the audiobook for you. Be considerate of them. You're welcome to troll them a little bit in the book, just like you're welcome to troll your readers a little bit, which I do. I troll them, and I also put a lot of puns in my books. I mean, my books are just rife with puns. But like I say, be considerate of people. Go ahead and do the fancy names, but make sure that you're not going to drive people away when they read the names. Because I've had that with books where the book is starting out good, you're doing great, and then you start getting into these really jacked up names, and it just takes all the fun out of the book. I can't remember the name of the book. Probably a good thing. But there's one where this guy has a 26 character name. It's bloody almost impossible to pronounce. I felt bad for the poor audiobook reader that had to read that thing. And he's a main character. See, he's all through that book. So you're having to do this name over and over and over again. It got pedantic and it got tedious. And I eventually just dropped the book. It was just not worth it. So anyhow, I'll leave it at that. And if you guys want me to cover more things on names, if I happen to have anything else to add, please let me know, and I'll happily spin up another video for you guys to answer those questions, or I can just answer them in the comments or wherever. So, as always, thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you next time.